Hello, gamers! So this is a video idea I've been kicking around for a long time, which is an Iron Man tier list. Tier listing all the Fire Emblem games for how Iron Man friendly or Iron Man well or Iron Man good. How if you want to do an Iron Man but you don't know what game to pick, this is sort of my tier list in terms of like games that really embrace the Iron Man playstyle versus games that really reject it. I've been kicking this idea around for a while, but what really got me to make it is Casual Jacob, friend of the channel, is releasing a video about Iron Mans and why he loves them so much and trying to like sales pitch people on the joy of Iron Mans, right? And so if you're interested in that, this is supposed to be like a companion piece to that video. So there will be a link to that below as well as in the end card. Check it out, especially if you are uncertain about Iron Mans, if you're sort of like wishy-washy about like, I don't know, it seems like this sort of hardcore challenge run for gamers that aren't me. I think that it is a really well-made video and really conveys the genuine like joy that it comes from playing these games. I guess as Kaga intended would be with an asterisk, because Kaga has said that he designed the game like he didn't think people would reset on character deaths, but since Marth gives a game over, he's sort of like, I would assume that Kaga didn't have an Iron Man in mind so much as like a Tin Man, right? Where you will replay if you get a game over, but like you're not going to delete your whole save file. I guess I should talk about what an Iron Man is in case anyone doesn't know. It's basically just a permadeath run where you will never reset your save file, and if you get a game over, you delete your save file. So you have to play through any deaths, if you have to play through any like villages get destroyed or you fail any side objectives, thief escapes with an item, all of that, you have to play through it. I think most people who Iron Man, myself included, also do not allow for any rewind, like Mila's Turn Wheel or Divine Pulse or whatnot. You're technically not resetting the game, so I guess you could kind of think of it like a fucking Species Clause and Nuzlocke, where it's not technically part of the rules, but almost everyone plays with it. Although I would say it's probably even stronger than that. Like, I would be very surprised to hear of someone who says that they like Iron Man but allow for the turn wheels, because it feels sort of counterintuitive to what the Iron Man is about, you know, playing through your mistakes. If you get to rewind 10 times, you're not really playing through your mistakes. That being said, you know, it is just sort of a fun, for funsies game mode, so, you know, if you want to turn wheel with the Iron Man, you know, that's your prerogative. But my general sort of like criteria for what games are good for Iron Mans, I think there's 3 things that make a game good for Iron Mans. One is a relatively large cast. That way, you know, if you've only got 7 characters available for most of the game, a death is hugely impactful. Whereas if you have like 40 characters available and you can only deploy 7 every map, yeah, deaths are still impactful, but you have replacements. You know, you've got the fodder squad, the bench squad, and they can come out and sort of, you know, oh no, Abel died. Okay, Roche, your turn. Fill in. I also think the quality of the cast is good in terms, or not necessarily quality, but like join time. I think people who join in like the mid game and late game are sort of essential for Iron Mans. One of the reasons that Three Houses often is not super Iron Man friendly is the cast is really front loaded. And so while in games where like there are the high investment units, that does kind of feel bad to lose them in an Iron Man. I don't think it's a deal breaker as long as you can get lesser replacements in the mid to late game to sort of fill in the ranks if like, oh no, we just had a massacre, I need help, Pent, please help me, Harkin, please help me, that sort of deal. And the third thing is, I think, having some measure of control over all fail states. Now, ideally, I think you would have measure of control over side objectives as well, but especially if it's a fail state, if it's something where, like, you will get a game over when this unit dies. Famously, Radiant Dawn is pretty bad in the early game about having game over conditions that you just cannot interact with before there's the possibility of them dying. Jill in 1-6 as a green unit can sometimes just die before you can reach her, even with maximum shoves. Fiona as a green unit in 1-7-2 or 1-7-B or whatever it's called, is another one where just she can get unlucky and get massacred while you're rushing to get her. I know in FE7, there's the Defend Zephiel Battle for Dawn chapter that can be a little bit rough. Although that one, I think we'll talk about it when we get to FE7, but I think the difficulty of that, the RNG of it, is a little bit exaggerated. But yeah, those are sort of like my mindset, whereas like a bad Iron Man game would be very front-loaded, very small cast, and a lot of randomness stuff. And these are just sort of like, you know, in between. Just sort of feel it out. Probably too many tiers, honestly. I don't think we necessarily need an F tier. There we go, that's better. That is better. We'll just sort of adjust this. I'm only tiering the mainline games. Funny enough, the Warriors games, like these Warriors games, they actually have a permadeath mode. And I guess you could like also Iron Man TMS and like Heroes or whatever. But like I'm just tiering the mainline games. So, you know, sue me if you have a problem with that. But let's start out with Fire Emblem 1. As I mentioned in sort of the preamble, Kaga did not think people would reset for dead soldiers, which is why there are so many, I mean, I call them FE1 replacement units, stuff where it's like, really? McAllen? Well, I guess, you know, if Roger died, I'd use McAllen. The guys who just sort of like, they fill in the ranks if you had a bunch of casualties in the previous maps. It's also, just as a low numbers game, relatively easy to take one of those units, even if they're lower on the tier list, and sort of train them up over a couple of chapters, and get them up in shape. You're not going to be in a situation where, like, if you lose Pent and you have a level 7 Urk, he's not going to really be able to replace Pent, if you didn't train him up earlier in the game. Whereas, like, if you lose Roger and you didn't train Doga, you could probably just bring Doga off the bench, and, like, after one chapter, he'll be fine. The late game of FE1, the numbers do kind of push you against that, but, like, for having 0%ed growth Sid, there's a lot of characters you can just be like, yeah, I'll just pull you off even if I didn't train you from earlier or whatever. Especially with how promotion works in FE1. Promotion is rare, but when you get it, it just brings you up to class bases, so we can just, like, zoom you up. Like, if you bring Navarro out, you can just, if you want a hero, like, oh no, Ogma died, but I have another hero crest, I'll bring the Navarro, and now he's a hero as well. I think it's, I mean, it's S tier, right? It has to be. It's kind of designed for it. As I say, I don't think it's designed for Iron Man. I do think what Kaga had in mind is closer to what we would call Tin Man. I also think, and I didn't really mention this criteria, but I do think it's relevant, just lesser than the other three. A strong main character can make a game sort of simpler to Iron Man. You know, if you have a full party wipe, Roy's probably not going to be able to handle things. But if you have a full party wipe with someone like Radiant Dawn Ike, Radiant Dawn Ike can handle things. It's not going to be easy to solo a map with Ike after everyone dies, but, like, if you need to, you know, Corrin and whatnot, they can carry the weight, Robin and all that fun stuff. Gaiden, so Gaiden, after Kaga realized that, like, oh, people are resetting for the cast, he sort of took the opposite approach and got a very small, very intimate cast, to sort of develop the characters out. And as a result of that, I think Gaiden's actually a pretty bad Iron Man game. You have revival fountains, and I know some people disqualify revival fountains, but I personally think they're part of the game you're not resetting, and they're a limited feature. So all the revival features, even the, like, the less limited ones, like in Genealogy, I think are on the table for me personally when it comes to Iron Mans. But Gaiden just has a very small cast, it's a very specialized cast, and the revival fountains themselves don't really do much to alleviate this, because they're pretty late in the game. So if you have just a couple of key casualties early on, you can find yourself in a pretty sticky wicket. You know, like, you only have Lucas, Alm, and 3 villagers to start out, and you'll get a couple of people flowering in, but I think it's like, what, 20 characters total? FE2 cast. Yeah, so I just looked it up. Alm's party only includes 16 characters, and that includes Mycen, who joins you in Act 4, or in Act 5, rather, sorry, in the final act. He joins at the end of Act 4, like, once you beat everything and you're ready to go into Act 5. So, like, it's ridiculously small cast, even accounting for the revives, and the revives come super late. There's also just some RNG elements that feel... I mean, I don't think... obviously, if you're playing an Iron Man, right, I think it's more entertaining to have some RNG out of your control that you have to adapt to, as opposed to just like, I have a spreadsheet, I can fill all these moves and do it exactly. Well, then why are we Iron Manning, right? Like, why at that point, just do an LTC or something. But if you... I think the degree of randomness in Gaiden is a little extreme. Terrain gives so much avoid that it's just really hard to come up with any sort of reliable strategy, and not even like reliable strategy in terms of like LTC, but like, oh, you know, I just missed 4 60s in a row, and now full party wipe. It just does not feel fit for Iron Man. There is like lots of optional grinding you can do, so I guess it's not the end of the world, like if you want to, but then like, if you're just stomping through with a bunch of overpowered people, is that really fun, and is that really in the Iron Man spirit? I don't think this is like a D tier. I think it might be D tier, actually. The more I talk about it, these feel like opposite ends of the design spectrum when it comes to Iron Mans. There's definitely worse. You get some mid-game pre-promotes like Gold Knights and stuff. I think I'll leave it in C for now. We'll see how this fills out. So, as far as FE3 is confirmed, there's 2 books, and Book 2 is a remake of Book 1. That being said, since I already tiered FE1, Book 1, it makes some changes. It cuts down on the cast, but it's not that different. Not so much that, like, I wish it was just separated, like I could tier them both. But they do probably both end up in the same place, which I think is A tier. The thing about Book 1, so Book 1, I think Book 1 could probably be S tier. It's like a slightly smaller cast. Yeah, I think Book 1 could be S tier, but Book 2 is definitely A tier, because the cast is pretty unbalanced. You still have, like, a large number of characters, but you run into the problem where there are suddenly some key characters that if they die, you're up a river in Shit Creek. You know, Paula, Katria, Zeke. You have very powerful early pre-promotes, and then if they die, you don't really get strong people to replace them. You get some mid-game people who can replace them, like, I mean, I guess them dying, you don't want a Pent situation, right? Where, like, Urk died, who cares, I replace him with Pent, that's an upgrade. So I think it's probably for the best that, like, the mid-game people, like Kane and Abel and whatnot, are not super strong. I guess the main issue would be critical hits are just always a factor. So, skill is a point of crit in this game, which means that when facing heroes in particular, you are almost always just at a threat of getting crit and killed with the majority of your units. You can use supports to lower the crit, like to get some crit avoid, for the units that have them, but supports are rare in this game. And there's no, like, Hoplon Guard equivalent. Thracia has scrolls, but the Dragon Stones, or not the Dragon Stones, Zodiac Stones, the Light Stones, don't, like, they're sort of like scrolls in that they affect your growth rates, but they don't negate crit. So, you just kind of always have to deal with heroes saying fuck you. And if a character holding a stone dies, you're locked out of the true ending, which I think feels bad. I think it feels like a fail state, not like the ultimate fail state, but you are locked out of, like, you get a very bad ending. Harden dies and then the world gets destroyed. So I think probably A tier instead of S tier, because it does still have that Arcanea cast. There's a bunch of Arcanea-style replacement units, because it's in Arcanea. But it just doesn't feel quite as Iron Man friendly. Still, definitely one that I would, like, recommend if you're trying to decide, especially since a lot of people don't want to deal with the Nest jank. But A tier, I think, feels appropriate. Genealogy is a weird one. Because in Genealogy, you have the Gaiden problem where, like, the cast is super small. But you get Valkyrie, which is like revival shrines on steroids, because it lets you can revive. Basically, you spend money to revive a character, because you use the staff to revive a character, and then you spend money to repair the Valkyrie staff, and then you can use Valkyrie to revive another character. Of course, only Claude and Claude's kid can use it, so if Claude dies, you lose Valkyrie, but as long as you keep Claude alive, you can kind of just treat the second half of Gen 1 as, no, we don't need to Iron Man anymore, and then depending on your pairings, like if you pair Claude and Aideen, or no, that would just give it to Lester. I guess the earliest Claude son that can use Valkyrie would be Ced, right? If you go Claude Aaron, then Ced can use it. So that if you do that, it's the second half of Gen 2. But even if you go like Claude Tailtew and get it on Corpo instead, for the last like 2 chapters, which are kind of the hardest ones, you can have this sort of infinite revive moment. The other half of things, though, is, I mean, one, doing the arena in an Iron Man setting can often lead to, whoops, all of my units now have 1 HP at the start of the map, which is a little annoying. Because the FE4 arena is sort of like a big source of golden experience, but if you lose, you have 1 HP. There's also, like, Great Shield. Like, you're not getting the bargain band in an Iron Man scenario, probably. Which is annoying. If you screw up your pairings, you're kind of, like, locked into them. The existence of substitute units does mean, however, that, like, even Gen 1 deaths just don't really impact you as big a deal as they would, for Gen 2. Because, like, even though, yeah, if Aaron dies, like, you don't get Ced and you don't get, Fee, which, like, those are both pretty good units that you don't want to miss out on. You get Hawk and Femina, who can, like, kind of replicate them. And those are some of the stronger substitutes. You know, Ira dying, you lose Larsa and Ulster, and you get Rotoban and Shakath instead. And those are not very good units, but also the people they're replacing aren't very good, right? So, like, who would even be, like, the most impactful mom to die in an Iron Man? I think Lachesis. I had to play without Lachesis in my most recent one. Someone paid like $100 for me to kill her off and to do substitutes. But even then, like, Dermot's like okay. Not having Charm really sucked. But Jian just like was Jian, so it's like it's fine. Overall, despite the small cast and the annoying RNG for some side objectives, I don't think there's any main objectives that have so much RNG involved, and even annoying stuff like the Add of Bolting guy, there are ways you can play around it, like really high avoid on if you go for Seti Arthur, or you can get silence on Lana, so there's ways to play around it, and because of that, I think that there's enough leniency for it to be B tier. It still has a lot of the problems that Gaiden does, but I do think it is significantly better in terms of ways you can sort of play around them. The Iron Man safety rails feel tighter, if that makes any sense. Those safety rails are a lot less present in the other Jekyll game, Thracia. So on the one hand, there is sort of the hit rate issue where hit rates are just universally lower in Thracia. It's sort of like what people who don't use anima users think the Binding Blade is like, where you're just constantly facing 70s and 80s and there's not much you can do about it. Although Thracia does have pre-built supports, and you can get like 10 extra hit and avoid if you're taking advantage of those. I mean, the hit is what's relevant in that case. There's also charisma, leadership stars. Like, there's ways you can edge it, but even still, like, Iron Sword is like 75 hit or 70 hit or something. If you use the 1-2 range weapons, like Hand Axe is 45. It's pretty absurd. So you're going to be regularly facing low hit rates, which does make it inherently kind of a swingy game in terms of an Iron Man. There's going to be a lot of moments of like, oh shit, gotta react to that. But you also get RNG in your favor, stuff like Movement Stars, Adept, a bunch of like proc skills actually, like Soul and Astra and shit. So that's kind of cool. Movement level ups also are like, they're always hype, but there's so much more hype in an Iron Man, like you have no fucking idea. But then there's, like, the bad RNG side of things, where you will sometimes just get an enemy that rolls up on move, or, like, enemies with movement stars, or the specific maps designed to be hell, like Sias Leadership Star Jump Scare, where you've just got so much RNG stacked against you. The Salem Sleep stuff, if you're trying to do, like, the Guidance, which you probably want to access good units, there's things like capturing to access Chapter 8X, although you could just kill Tanya off. I think killing Tanya off is like an Iron Man, like you miss out on the boots, but it's probably a good Iron Man strategy just so you don't lose Dagda. And also so that if you lose Asbel, you don't get fucking soft-locked, because that's the other thing, the Asbel problem. There's a couple of games where non-game over conditions feel like game over conditions. And Thracia, I think, is the first of them, because Asbel, like, if you're doing an Iron Man and you lose Asbel early on, just fucking reset. How are you killing bosses on Gates and Thrones? Gates, Thrones, and Forts give 10 defense in this game, and Asbel is the only mage. You have, like, the Flame Sword, I guess, so, like, Fergus can be a mage in a pinch. But it is really, he is so centralizing, because the second mage you get is Salem, and the third one is Homer, and they're both, Salem is 12x, and Homer is 14, so they're both really, really late as compared to Asbel. Enemy movement levels are also, like, a pretty big deal, pretty annoying deal. Chapter 10 has a Wyvern with a movement star who can just, like, fly over and killer lance you, which is very silly. I think in general, the level of ridiculousness and things that can go wrong for you in Thracia, like, it's swingy, right? There's ridiculousness on your end, too, so sometimes it just feels like a gambling game. But with enemies that, like, gain extra movement levels, it can, depending on the enemy, it can just fuck you over. Like, in Chapter 4 and 4X, if you get the wrong enemy movement level, you're just dead. But it can also inspire, like, strategy adjustments in a way that is kind of fun to adapt on the fly to, like, oh shit, this guy's got, like, extra move, I didn't need to plan for that. I think it's ultimately, like, it's got a deeper cast than Gaiden as well. And I'm assuming that, like, if you're Iron Manning Thracia, you know a lot about Thracia. Like, don't Iron Man Thracia as your first Thracia playthrough. There's shit like warp tiles and ambush spawns and stuff that, like, if you're Iron Man Thracia, you should be familiar with Thracia so you don't get like, oh, I lost my Iron Man because I didn't know about the In America trap, right? And you should probably have a guide open, although I would say that that's probably best practice for every Iron Man, just in case there's something you forgot. That being said, I think it's a rewarding game to Iron Man because of all the hype moments, and I think that it's got a deep enough cast with pre-promotes and stuff that I would say it's probably better to Iron Man than Genealogy. I don't know if it's an A tier Iron Man game though. There is a lot of RNG that can just kind of fuck you, you know? Now, Fire Emblem 6, I mentioned the low hit rates, and those are a problem in the early game. Although, if you're willing to grind supports, then you can mitigate them to an extent. You have fire support Roy very early on. Oh, whoops, sorry. There's other... What are the other good hit supports? I think Lot and Wade have a hit support. Look up the Game Boy Affinities. If you're willing to grind supports, which I think if you're doing an Iron Man, you probably should be willing to take that edge. It's fine if you don't want to, just like, I'm going to assume it's on the table because it is a tool at your disposal. And if you do that and you use anime characters and you use sword characters, I think this is an S tier Iron Man game. It does have the problem that FE3 has, where it's very possible just to get blown out, someone dies with a holy weapon, and you lose the true ending. And there are a lot of individual characters that are also anti-true endings. If you lose, like, Lilina before her Gaiden, if you lose Zeus before his Gaiden, then you get locked out of the true ending. So there's a lot of characters that feel like game over conditions. But you have a lot of ways to mitigate, like, crits. They're not going to be as prevalent as in FE3 because skill doesn't equal crit anymore. And even though there's no Hoplon guard, oh, that's the thing I didn't mention for Thracia as well. You can, each scroll, you have like infinite Hoplon guards basically. You have 12 Hoplon guards. So that helps with like mitigating the RNG there. But in terms of FE6, there's no Hoplon guard, but if you're grinding supports, you can use like anti-crit supports to deal with the killing edge enemies, because there are some killing edge enemies. But unless you're facing a killer enemy, most characters won't face crit. Like low luck characters like Rutger and Fear will. But most of your like competent luck characters will be fine. Losing Marcus early on can feel like a run ender, but the early game is possible without him. It just feels like hammering nails into you. Like hammering nails into your knuckle or something. And then, like, there's some randomness in Chapter 7 with the Green Unit AI potentially pulling the Wyverns, and, like, that can cause a catastrophe. But you can, like, rush forward to try to recruit them before that becomes an issue. Or you can adapt to the Wyverns and just, like, give up on the ring. You get 3 Thieves very early on as well, so Thief utility is not going to be... Like, you get Chad, like, is the first Thief, but then you get Astolfo in 8 and Kath in 12, so you shouldn't run into, like, unless all 3 of your Thieves die, you're not going to run into, like, the Matthew problem where it's like, well, I lose all the treasures. I think this is a very, very Iron Man-able game. I guess the cast is kind of front-loaded, but you get a good number of, like, pre-promotes that range from strong, like Percival and Milady, to decent filler, like Garrett and Douglas, and even Hugh, who's not a pre-promote, or Zeus, who's not a pre-promote. Like, if you are in dire straits, if your Iron Man's in dire straits, they can fill in and do just fine. And then, like, in the early and mid-game, you get a good number of, like, oh no, Shanna died. Well, I guess that's a bad example. No, you can get Tate without Shanna, because of Klein. There are definitely some, like, Lilina dies, you lose a couple of characters. There's characters, like, chain into each other. Chlorine dies, you lose a couple of characters. And, like, that can suck, but just keep Chlorine alive, right? Like, she's a pretty important character. Keep Lilina alive, she's a pretty important character. They are frail characters, too, so, like, you know, you don't want to be exposing them to too much danger anyway. But yeah, I think this is an S tier Iron Man game. And I think FE7 might be as well. So FE7 does give you stronger mid to late game pre-promotes. You know, Pent, Hawkeye, Harkin, Athos, who's like, you know, the latest of late game. He's the Goto, but like Athos is the anti-soft lock. So that's good on its part. You do have to train up, or no, you don't have to train up, but you do have to keep alive Eliwood and Lyn, or Eliwood and Hector, or Lyn and Hector, depending on the route. And that can be like a bit of a hassle, but that's not really RNG dependent. It adds like an extra squabble. I think I mentioned the Matthew problem. I think that's probably enough to sink it down to A tier. So Matthew is a character similar to Asbel, where if he dies early on, it feels like, oh, I might as well fucking reset this Iron Man. Because he's your only thief until Legault at Dragon's Gate. And so that means not only are you going to have to, like, drag door keys around, like, Dragon's Gate, even just recruiting Legault without Matthew becomes a pain in the ass. But, like, not only are you going to have to drag door keys around, but you miss out on... If it's Hector hard mode, basically every promotion item. You miss out on some silvers, you miss out on some gems. The silver card, if you lose Matthew, you lose the silver card. Thankfully, like, for RNG purposes, he can steal almost everything he needs to at base. The silver card's the only one he needs to level speed in, and he has a good speed growth as well. But losing Matthew's a big deal. Battle Before Dawn is another one that, like, I think people think it has more RNG to it than it does. If you have a strong team, you can rush forward and, like, save Zethia without a problem. But then you get, like, annoying shit like moving Ursula in the fog, where even if you know the map, you don't know where she's at. The more I think about it, the more I think FE7 might not be as good of an Iron Man game. I don't think it's B tier, though. I think it is solidly low A. Because the cast is, like, it's the definitive Iron Man cast. You got the early game squad, and they get replaced with the late game squad, because the late game squad is just stupid. Which I guess, like, I mean, that's part of why I don't like it, is it doesn't feel rewarding to train up your units. But it does feel like, you know, if you lose a trained Canas, well, Pent is right around the corner. I guess on the other end of things, late game losses can sort of add up. You still have Athos, and Athos can, like, not quite solo, but kind of solo the last map. But, like, and, like, with Renault's help, too. But, like, Victory or Death's gonna be trouble if you don't have too many people left after, like, Sands of Time or something. Cause, you know, like, if fucking, you know... What, your whole team dies or whatever, or not your whole team, but, like, you take heavy casualties, who's coming off the bench? You can't really do the thing that you do in, like, Binding Blade, where it's like, well, just instant promote Gonzalez, and, like, then he's the filler Zerker or whatever. Instant promote Hugh. I don't know. It becomes, like... I think it is a little bit harder to fill holes in the late game, but that's made up for by the fact that it's easier to fill holes that happened early on. And you get very powerful late game units. Like, let's be honest, you're not usually losing, like, Harkin, Pent, Hawkeye, and Vida all on the same map or something like that, right? Like, that's just sort of the little Timmy shouldn't have Iron Man'd in general experience. Maybe that's a little bit mean, but yeah, that feels like I'm looking for a problem that doesn't necessarily exist. Sacred Stones. So Sacred Stones is in a weird spot where, like, a lot of features of the game feel Iron Man unfriendly. Almost everyone's a training unit, even the, like, mid-game joiners are, like, underleveled training units, because they want you to go to the Tower of Valny. And if you want to, you can, like, train up Tana or whatever. Although that's not exactly risk-free in an Iron Man setting. And a lot of people, myself included, like, discount grinding. But there's, like, this big... The thing is, it's super easy, right? Like, this isn't a ranking on how difficult the games are, but I can't really ignore that Sacred Stones is an incredibly easy game, and it being easy makes it a good suggestion for your first Iron Man, because it's harder to screw up, right? If you've never Iron Manned before, and you're like, I wanna try Iron Manning, I'll point you to, like, Birthright, Path of Radiance, and Sacred Stones, just because they're easy, and so you can sort of get a feel for, like, building the Iron Man habits in a lower stakes environment. That being said, like, Seth, I mean, like, it could devolve into a Seth solo, let's be real. But Seth just sort of, like, is the only pre-built out-of-the-box unit until you get to, like, Garrick or Dusel, depending on the route you're going. I guess Inez is, like, kind of okay filler. Saleh's okay filler. I mean, Saleh's actually more than okay filler. Saleh's quite good. I think Sacred Stones lands, like... probably here. I think it being easy is what's holding it up here, because otherwise, like, you run into the situation of, like, if Seth dies, who's replacing him? Your level 7 Franz? I mean, probably. And that's the thing, is, like, if the game were harder, then Seth dying would be a bigger deal. Like, if there was a super hard mode or something, right? In addition to hard, there's, like, Maniac or whatever we want to call it. The extra hard, the gamer mode, right? Gamer difficulty. But as it stands, that gamer mode doesn't exist. No gamers for Sacred Stones. So, like, Franz can just replace Seth. I think I'm gonna give Blazing Sword the edge because it does feel structured, like built to be Iron Man, whereas Sacred Stones really doesn't feel built to be Iron Man, but it's... If you're like not super confident, I'll put it this way. If you're looking for a game for your first Iron Man, Sacred Stones is probably a better choice than FE7. But if you're looking for a game, like if you're confident in your skills and you want an Iron Man, Fire Emblem 7 has more going for it from the Iron Man department. Fire Emblem 9 is an interesting one. So it's got the easy mode stuff that Sacred Stones has, but it also has a cast that is more like built towards Iron Manning. You get a lot of filler mid-game and late-game units. You know, you get the Hawks alongside Raisin. You get multiple Sages that are quite good, even if they have knives. Like, so they're a downgrade. Well, I mean, Khalil isn't a downgrade from, like, your trained Sages just because stats, but Bastion's a downgrade from, like, a trained Soren or Ileana or Tormod or whatever. A lot of the mid-game Lagoos can sort of be filler units if you had casualties, like Moaram or Janaf and Ulki or any of that sort of stuff. Obviously, like, secret unit Stefan exists as well. But even just, like, Joffrey, Har, Tanith is so fucking good. Yeah, there's a good deal of, like, late-game units that can sort of fill in holes. You also run into the situation where your early game units can fill in holes because of bonus experience. Like, let's say your cavalry all died and you have just an untrained Kieran on the bench, but you have, like, 500 bonus experience. You can just feed him a ton of bonus experience and then suddenly he's good and roaring to go, right? And that sort of solves that problem even without the cast, although the cast does feel structured in such a way that it accommodates the Iron Man, right? I think this is probably another S-tier Iron Man game. Not Maniac mode, but that's because Maniac mode sucks ass, right? But I think I almost think it's a better Iron Man game than Binding Blade. It's just a worse game, like it's less fun. So I would personally rather Iron Man Binding Blade. But Path of Radiance has more, like, Iron Man-esque qualities going for it. There's less, like, RNG issues. Biorhythm can introduce them sometimes for, like, Boyd and stuff, but you can mitigate it, too, with, like... Well, you don't have supports. You get, like, 5 hit from your support level. God, Path of Radiance supports are so fucking bad. But, like, just use a unit who's not Boyd. Like, use a good unit, is how you mitigate that. But, you know, casualties are really easy to replace. There's not really any RNG-related game over stuff. And, yeah. Yeah. And then, like, in the very, very late game, Ike, like, once Ike gets Ragnar, he just destroys the last 2 maps. And so you get a sneak preview of that what if the Lord was really strong thing, which I guess also impacts Sacred Stones if you go Ephraim route, but I'm not assuming Ephraim versus Erica route in Sacred Stones. Radiant Dawn is a tough one. So, on the surface, it does have, like, a really large cast and bonus experience, although it works slightly differently from Path of Radiance. But you can still relatively use, like in an Iron Man setting, you can use it the same way, just to train someone up from the bench. But it's weird because, so there's a lot of, like, game over conditions outside of your control, but most of them take place in the early game. Like Jill and Fiona I mentioned earlier, those are both during part 1. The Black Knight Micaiah fight, god, that's an Iron Man fucking nightmare. But again, that's during part 1, whereas the later you get, I feel like the later you get into an Iron Man of Radiant Dawn, the more control you have over things going wrong. The Brahmin Nephany map is another one where, like, things can just go wrong out of your control and there's not really any way to recover it. And the Fog map that comes after that, the Alencia Fog map, where, not Alencia, but, like, you got Lucia and her army and stuff. God, Part 2's armies, I call them Alencia army, and Alencia is never on the fucking field. It's so weird. But, yeah, there's... The later you get into a Radiant Dawn Iron Man, the more stable it gets. You do still have a decent number of game over conditions, but I don't think having a large number of game over conditions is, like, the worst thing in the world for an Iron Man. Like, everyone will point to, like, you know, oh, Edward and Leonardo caused game over in the first 3 maps, which is like, yeah, they do. And, like, that's stupid. Like, they shouldn't. But, you know, later on having, like, oh, Alencia and Tabarn will both cause a game over here. We'll just keep both of them safe, right? Like, you've got a lot of units. I feel the same way about the 3 Lords in FE7, right? Where having these extra game over conditions, it makes it harder, but I don't think it makes it less Iron Man friendly. There are definitely central units. Har is a big one. Soth is a big one. Zehark. I guess there's a good amount of, like, Avo-based units, especially for the Dawn Brigade. The Dawn Brigade portions can be hard, Iron Man-wise. Is this our first D tier? I think this is a very rough one to Iron Man. It gets easier the longer it goes. It's also just a super long game. So, like, game overing during part 4 feels so bad. It's like, do I really want to redo all of that now? And I think that is, like, a factor, the exhaustion factor, right? I'm gonna say Radiant Dawn is a D-tier Iron Man game. S-tier game, but D-tier Iron Man game. Oh, these got swapped. But FE11 is the most Iron Man-able game in the series, and I don't think it's ever getting dethroned. It's got all of the upside of FE1, although it has higher difficulty modes if you want to, like, press it with hard 4 or 5, that sort of stuff. So you get, and in those modes, you can't really take untrained Rocher off the bench. But what you can do is kill off a bunch of your characters, because you get replacement units, like literal replacement units. Generic characters join if your roster size gets too low. And so you can just, like, churn through waves of human bullets, only keeping, like, 4 or 5 actual characters alive if you want to do, like, the Emblem strat. But even if you're not intentionally killing people, just having those constant coming in replacements, and you do feel punished because they tend to be weaker than the named characters. So it's not, because I would think, like, if you don't feel punished for death, what's the point of Iron Manning? But I do think getting the generics instead of the named characters feels like a fitting punishment, because they are weaker than the named characters for the most part. And specific named characters dying, like if you lose Sita, oh boy. If you lose whoever you got Warp on, oh boy, right? But reclassing helps a lot. Like, speaking of Warp, hey, I need a healer and my healer's died, like Riss is dead. Well, let me just reclass Nabarl to Priest now, right? And that works. I just think FE11 is just, it's the, if you want to Iron Man, and because it has 6 difficulty modes too, right? Like, I'm not even gonna say, like, oh, if you want a first Iron Man, it's not good for it because hard 5's difficult. No! If you've never Iron Man before and you're not, like, confident in your Fire Emblem skills, fucking play on hard 1 or normal. You know, play the tutorial. Iron Man the tutorial. You'll do it. You'll be fine. Meanwhile, even though this has a lot of difficulties, all of them are pretty hard. Like, I think FE12 is the hardest game in the series, question mark? If not, it's, like, up there. It has a lot of the same positive qualities of 11. I think it's... So, it's got much more, like, really centralizing units, similar to how 3 did. But I think the fact that, like, there's not the annoying, like, skill equals crit stuff. you're not gonna, honestly, you're not gonna face that much RNG, because, like, hit rates are pretty high, crit rates are pretty low, so you can, like, you can't really rely on dodge tank strategies, and you can kind of assume you're going to hit most of your attacks. So it all comes down to sort of, like, executing a plan rather than RNG stuff. That can take away from some of the Iron Man joy, where, like, adapting to missing an 80% is part of the Iron Man skill, like learning that, learning to check numbers, learning to boost that 80% because I have a 10% support I am not taking advantage of, like that sort of stuff, right? But ultimately, I think because it has, like, the replacement units, it has these sort of, like, safety valves, the reclassing safety valve, the forging, to sort of, like, invest. This game also introduced Convoy Warp, and so, like, New Mystery also has it, which means that unit deaths feel less punishing. Like, if you had, like, you know, a super valuable weapon, like Silver Sword, and it's on Guy, you know, the greatest swordsman in Sakai, and then he gets, like, 2% crit, you lost Guy, your favorite unit, but then you also lost the Silver Sword. But now, if Samto dies with the Silver Sword, well, you can give the Silver Sword to Rad, right? And I think Convoy Warp, combined with, like, the replacement unit, sort of elevates New Mystery probably, like, here. I think FE1's probably a better Iron Man game, but New Mystery... I think it goes here, actually. Yeah, no, I think it goes here. I think it goes up above... I think it goes above FE1, which hurts me, because I love FE1 and I hate FE12, but I have to be honest. Replacement units, Convoy Warp, no RNG, or very little RNG for stuff. Yeah, it's a nice Iron Man game if you want to have to adapt to plans going wrong. It's probably not for you. You probably pick one of the ones where hit rates don't consistently hit like 100%. But if you just want to, like, try to complete the Iron Man, there's a lot less working against you than in these other games. Awakening. So, very, very broad scale in terms of difficulty. Like, normal mode to Lunatic mode to Lunatic Plus mode. Or Lunatic Reverse? Lunatic Plus? The mode with random skills. Very wide breadth. I think it can appeal to a good deal of, like, skill sets, right? Whether you're unskilled or super skilled, like pro gamer versus casual gamer. You do get... So, the cast is very front-loaded, and the people you get in the second half, because they're child units, losing a mother loses 2 units, which can feel very punishing. It can stop you from getting those, like, roster refills that I think are a core part of, like, an Iron Man-able game, right? Like, if you lost Muriel and you want a mage replacement, well, suddenly Laurent can't be a mage replacement, right? And it's an unfortunate side effect that's going to affect all the Fates games as well. You do get some mid to late game units, like Sairi, Tiki, if you want to do the Tiki paralogue, which, like, ooh. Morgan is basically guaranteed because Robin's a game over. And I guess with that in mind, Robin is also, like, one of the first super overpowered lords. I guess Chris also exists, so that's another dub for New Mystery. But Robin and Crom, both being very strong units, means that even under heavy casualties, you're going to have some chance of pulling out victory before the, like, literal game over happens. The cast being so front-loaded does feel bad. I'm gonna say high B tier, probably. Worth noting, if you get, like, a marriage and then the mom dies, I'm pretty sure you can still get the kid to replace the mom. So you could, like, start banking, like, okay, I'm gonna do, you know, I'm gonna use Muriel as a big part of my team, and then I'm not doing Lauren's paralogue because if she dies, I'll do it to replace her. But there's no offspring seals in this game either, so not really any point of delaying it either. I don't know. It just feels so bad to have, like, the cast. I mean, it's also a very investment-heavy cast, so losses are going to feel more impactful, which I'm not super against. I think losses should feel impactful in an Iron Man, but I also think you shouldn't just be like, well, now I'm down someone with no replacement, right? I think replacement units are a big part of the Iron Man ecosystem. And in that same vein, let's talk about the other kid games, because Birthright, you get like almost all of your units in Birthright, because Ryoma's one of the last units to join, and he joins in chapter 12, I want to say. He joins right when the armory's available, so what, that's 14. Yeah, level 2 armory is available 14. And then the next non-child character to join you is Shura, all the way in fucking Hidden Capital near the end of the game. Birthright does get that Sacred Stones thing where, like, because it's easy, you can sort of, like, play through mistakes more easily. And, like, there is also just press the Ryoma button. Although I wouldn't say just press the Ryoma button in an Iron Man. He's not as RNG reliant as people say, and you can even do, like, Vantage. Like, I've done Vlad builds with him, right, where it's just, there's no RNG involved now, he just kills everything. But, I don't know, just, like, train up extra carries, especially in an Iron Man, like, train up Saizo, train up Obero, train up, like, the good units. It's just got that front-loaded cast problem, same as Awakening. I'm gonna put it above Awakening because it is an easier game to Iron Man. And unlike Awakening also, okay, this is actually what elevates it. The Offspring Seal, or not Offspring Seals. Offspring Seals, where you can just sort of delay them, get your characters married, and then keep the children as your backup plan, and, like, okay, well, you know, my Kaze died, rip me, I guess I should have supported Corrin. Bad example. My Jacob died, right? I still want a butler. Well, I guess it's a good thing he married someone and now I can go get Dwyer, right? Or something like that, right? Yeah, it's an alright Iron Man game. I think Conquest is a much harder Iron Man game. Of the 3 Fates games, it's definitely the most difficult. And so its cast is more spread out. Like, its Gen 1 cast is more spread out. You do sort of get that slow trickle. Shura joins sooner, Xander joins later, than as compared to Ryoma. But you still run into the problem of, like, once you get, like, Den of Betrayal, right? All you can expect is Zuma and Flora. Other than, like, you know, any Gen 2 units you've saved up, right? And I think that, combined with how punishing unit deaths can be, just because of the investment level, I think I'm gonna go ahead and put it in high C tier, right above Gaiden, just in terms of, I would say small cast, but if you factor in the kids, it's not a small cast. But then the kids are sort of the 2-for-1 deal of, like, my Arthur died early on, now I lose Percy, which always feels bad. And it eats into your Iron Man reserve. It's definitely an Iron Man-able game, especially if you have a lot of Fates knowledge and Fates skill. But it's definitely not one I would recommend unless you were, like, a Fates superstar, right? And a similar thing is true for Rev. Rev has definitely the highest highs and lowest lows in terms of cast members as well. So you get sort of the situation of, like, my tanky unit died, like I trained up Rinka, my tanky unit died. Well, it's harder to replace, like, with Benny or Effie. Well, bad example, because Benny is actually relatively easy to replace a tank with. My mage died, right? Hayato dies? Who the fuck is taking his place? Rev Odin? I don't think so. I think Rev is in the same boat as Conquest. You get more characters, so you have more sort of like fodder and potential replacement units. But you also run into the situation of once you dive into Vala, all you're getting are Flora, Fuga, and any kids you've trained up. And then you run into, like, getting 2-for-1. I think Rev is, like, slightly easier to Iron Man than Conquest. Actually, no, because in Conquest, Corrin is typically strong enough that Corgan solo as like a last minute, well, fuck, everyone's dead, is viable. I guess I could also touch upon capture. All three of these games feature capture, but it's tied to specific units, Orochi and Niles. And so, similar to the kids, you sort of run into this situation of like, well, I could use the captured units to replace my fallen comrades, but what if Orochi dies? And now suddenly she was the only capture bot in Birthright, so how am I supposed to capture people? You know, what if Niles dies? He's the only Conquest capture bot. How do I capture people, right? So I don't think capture is really the solution to, like, the Iron Man massacre problem. SOV is similar boat to Gaiden. I think it's a little bit better just because it's got a slightly larger cast. And any sort of options you lost in Gaiden, like the Death Warp and whatnot, are not as big a deal, because, like, are you really using Death Warp in an Iron Man? Like, consuming your resource that is the Revival Tower in a game where you don't know, like, in a run where you don't know how many deaths there are going to be. Combat Arts also give you, like, ways around the hit rate issues, where you can use a Combat Art to boost your hit, or you can use, like, specific spells or whatever. Well, you could use spells in Gaiden anyway, but Combat Arts to help fix hit issues is a thing. I think SOV is, like, a little bit easier to Iron Man than Gaiden, but I would still rather Iron Man a Fates game, just because even though Fates games, you are relying on, like, the kids to be those filler units, you at least get more of them. You just have to work for it. Three Houses is, like, the un-Iron Man game. You get all of your students early on. You can get more during part 1 if you build, like, supports and stuff, and they do auto-level, so, like, during the first half of the game, sure, you can fill in Iron Man slots, and if you're planning for it, you can start, like, build a bunch of supports but don't recruit people, like, hey, Raphael's ready to join me, but I'll ask him to join me when... Well, no, because they'll ask the... Oh, no, right! They ask themselves during the calendar time, and there's fucking RNG in that as well. I remember from my 0% Blue Lions run, I had to, like, continuously rig the calendar to try to get, like, Lysithea to join me on time, and then, like, all the other fucking scrubs that I got to join me on time. Oh, no. Yeah, no, it's worse than I remembered. Because, like, even if you get the people to fill in for you, it's just a roll as to whether they choose to join your class based on, like, support time or whatnot. You can also ask them to join your class, but I think you have to fulfill, like, stricter requirements for that. I don't remember the specifics. Either way, once you get to the second half of the game, you get no more new fucking units. Like, you do get awarded some units during the time skip. You get Gilbert, Yuritsa, and Sedith, depending on your route. But that's it. Oh, right, you can also get... If you're going Silver Snow, you get awarded auto-leveled Cyril, and he's ass. Yeah. The true Arcanea replacement unit. This is just in fact, this is probably what fucking F tier's made for, but I'm not making an entire tier just to have Radiant Dawn and Three Houses in separate tiers from each other. So instead I'll repurpose this to F tier, and we can move Engage up where it belongs. I think high A. So I think high A because it's got the, like, FE7-esque cast where you get a lot of strong pre-promotes to sort of fill in those slots. Actually, I think it might be, like, right below FE7 because it stops giving you strong pre-promotes, whereas FE7 doesn't. And you have the stupid fucking steel weapons give 10% crit. But you have tools to play around it. Like, you have the anti-crit engraves. Like, oh my god, the anti-crit engrave, the crit avoid engrave is going to be your best friend if you're Iron Manning Fire Emblem Engage. You have some supports to give crit avoid. You can do stuff like Bondage Shield or Vantage strats where like just you kill things and you don't get hit. If you're on the lower difficulties, the fog, the covert fog stuff to avoid crit stuff. So there's ways around it. The thing is that like Mavier is not Athos, right? Vale is not Athos. You do get the Bite and Blast from the Emblem Engage with Alir, the Fire Emblem, the 13th Emblem. So you can use like that to kill Sombron, but you don't really have the sort of like, oh shit, emergency button, you know, now Harkin joins. Harkin joins very late in FE7, whereas the latest joining like super strong unit in... Well, who are the super strong late joiners? Like, Panette's probably like the last of them, because you got Keketsu, Panette, Pandreo, Ivy, Zelka, like, you know, that whole squad. But they show up over the course of 3 mid-game chapters, and they're all, like, scrunkled together in their join time, too. Whereas, like, FE7 spreads its cast out. The more I talk about it, the more I think, like, Engage is actually not as Iron Man friendly as I thought it was. I think it's a high B tier. Like, it's better than the Fates games. But it's still not... Yeah, I think high B tier is where I would put it. Like, above Birthright. The crit on steel weapons, I think, is the most annoying part. Like, Tamira Stonk's on the rise, just because her personal skill's worth putting up with her, like, awful performance for. Yeah, I think that's where we're at. I think that's what I'm doing. So this is the tier list. Feel free to screen cap it and post it out of context and say, like, these are Danny's opinions on the game. She finally changed her mind and said Fire Emblem 7's best. Yo, Danny hates Three Houses. She said it's the worst in the franchise. Fortune's Weave, she's gonna jump out the window now. Because of Fortune's Weave. Yeah. This is my Iron Man tier list. Bye. Hey y'all, I'm gonna let you look at the tier list for a little longer while I thank my patrons. Thank you, Key the Iron Idol, Calamity Callie, Anon Wanderer, A Clever Username of Lies, Jack McMahon, Surin Galaxy, Tailored Muffin, Rezi, Andu, Len, Gameboo, Karosa, Firant, Your Doctor, Frozen Helm, Patwit, Pillow Willow, Girl Boss, Lizard Bongwater, Christopher Bueno, Marin McLean, Jaden, Reflect, Dylan Solis, Forever Lucas, Some Trade, Squeegee555, Smaz Ruby, Zygrom, Robin D, Alen B, Hound Dogs, They Tom, Klon, Reflect, Glup Shido, Electric Giga, Erica Ford, YLO1, George Grenville the 7th PM, Jamie Collins, Arvis, Crispy Matthews, Floahay, I Like Rattata, Amy Hazel, Faulty Videos, Lyra, Kyle Madison, Derek Williams, Anna Cabana, The Daily Fugle, Faye, Magic Bite, Thoughtful Insanity, Robin Goodfeller, Shinthea, Sardonic Muse, Diceike, Chris, Root Beer Pants, Queen Eliza, Controlled Aegis, Roman Kromansic, Knick Knack Hammersmack, Lepton, Cabbage, SUP, Caius Cole, Bree, Punch Fighter Champion, Eggman, Maxine the Vampire Queen, Dragon Mac Lancer, Carrier Has Left, Jill, Angel Nap Caceres, and especially my Jagans, Thick Mulder, Adele, Alexander Roper, Siggy, and Cereal Bowl. If you want to support the channel, there's a link below. As little as $3 a month is really helpful, but please only donate if you can comfortably afford to do so. Regardless of what you choose to do, though, I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay safe, gamers.